My name is Claire Donovan, and I was 26 years old the night my parents invited me to celebrate my promotion. Halfway through dinner, my mother folded her napkin, smiled across the table, and calmly informed me that I had never really been their daughter. Then she said something even worse. She told me they had only adopted me because it guaranteed them access to a family, trust they otherwise would never have received. According to her, that arrangement had finally run its course. My father slid a leather folder across the table. Inside were documents removing me from every future inheritance they controlled. They expected tears, shock, maybe begging. Instead, I looked at the folder, closed it, and stayed silent for nearly a full minute. Neither of them understood why. They thought silence meant I was breaking. It didn't. It meant I was deciding how much of the truth they deserved to hear, because 6 months before that dinner, I'd uncovered a secret neither of them realized existed. And while they believed they were ending my story, they had unknowingly reserved the best seat in the restaurant for the people who were about to begin it. What happened after my mother finally turned around is the reason I can tell this story today. The restaurant was called the Hawthorne House. White linen, crystal glasses, fresh orchids on every table. The kind of place where waiters moved quietly enough that you noticed them only when your glass was suddenly full again. I'd never eaten there before. That fact mattered, because my mother, Elaine Donovan, didn't spend money on me unless she'd already calculated what she'd receive in return. Birthdays had never interested her. Investments did. She was already sitting when I arrived. Navy silk blouse, pearl earrings, hair pinned so perfectly that not a strand seemed willing to disagree with her. Across from her sat my father, Richard Donovan, gray suit, gold watch, the expression of a man who had spent his entire life avoiding difficult conversations until someone else volunteered to speak first. My mother stood and kissed my cheek. There she is. So proud of you. She only hugged me twice a year. Christmas. And whenever witnesses were present, tonight qualified. The hostess smiled warmly. Happy birthday, Ms. Donovan. Before I could answer, my father corrected her. The reservation is under Elaine Donovan. Tiny detail. Most people would have forgotten it immediately. I didn't. Working in estate administration trains your brain to notice ownership. Names matter. Reservations matter. Titles matter. Who signs usually matters most. When we sat, I looked around the dining room. No flowers. No wrapped gift. No birthday dessert waiting nearby. Juiced menus, water glasses, and a leather portfolio resting beside my father's chair. Not exactly festive. Something about the evening reminded me of meetings at work. The ones where families smiled, politely right before someone learned they'd been excluded from a will. I knew that atmosphere. I worked inside it every day. I wasn't an attorney. I was a senior estate administrator for one of the largest probate firms in North Carolina. Most people imagine inheritance work is glamorous. It isn't. It's paperwork, deadlines, trust distributions, beneficiary disputes, boxes of family photographs no one wants to throw away but nobody wants to keep. I spent my days helping strangers understand what legally belonged to them after someone they loved was gone. I'd become very good at reading people who were about to deliver bad news. My parents looked exactly like those people. So, Mom smiled. How's work? Busy. We heard you're getting another promotion. I accepted it last week. Wonderful. She raised her wine. We always knew you'd do well. It was strange hearing that. Growing up, they'd never expected excellence. Only usefulness. There was a difference. When I was 7, my birthday cake came from the grocery store clearance shelf. The frosting had already started sliding off one side. Mom scraped it back into place with a butter knife. There. Good as new. Meanwhile, 2 weeks later, my cousin Adam celebrated turning 8 with pony rides, balloons, and a magician. I remember asking quietly, why don't I get parties? My aunt laughed before Mom could answer. Oh, sweetheart. Those are for family traditions. Then she smiled kindly. We're keeping things simple. Children remember strange things, not always the words, the feeling beneath them. That afternoon, I learned there were celebrations other children earned simply by existing. Mine had to justify their expense. By 10, I stopped asking for presents. By 12, I pretended I preferred staying home. By 15, birthdays became dinners with the 3 of us. Always quiet, always efficient, never joyful. I told myself some families were simply reserved. It took years to understand the truth. Reserved wasn't the word. Transactional was. The waiter returned. Can I start anyone with appetizers? My mother answered immediately. We'll skip them. She didn't even ask whether I wanted one. Same as always. Save where possible. Appear generous where visible. Dad finally spoke. You've been doing very well financially. I've been fortunate. You bought your condo last year. Yes. No mortgage help? I smiled. No. I managed. He nodded slowly. Impressive. He didn't say congratulations. He sounded like someone reviewing an investment report. The only person who ever made me feel genuinely celebrated was my grandmother, Margaret Donovan. Everyone called her Maggie. I called her Nana. Every Sunday afternoon at 4. Without fail, she called. Or I called her. Sometimes we talk about books. Sometimes recipes. Sometimes absolutely nothing important. But whenever we hung up, I always felt lighter than before. When I was 13, after another birthday spent watching my cousins unwrap expensive gifts while I thanked everyone for a sweater 3 sizes too large, I cried in Nana's kitchen. I don't think they like me. She dried her hands, walked over, lifted my chin gently, then said something I'd carry into adulthood. Love isn't measured by what people spend on you. It's measured by whether they make room for you. At 13, I thought she meant emotionally. Years later, I learned she meant something far more literal. Nana passed away when I was 24. The funeral brought together relatives I hadn't seen in years. Everyone cried. Everyone praised her generosity. Everyone talked about family. Afterward, life resumed surprisingly fast. Too fast. Within 6 weeks, my parents moved into Nana's historic home outside Charlotte. A beautiful white colonial she'd owned for decades. They said she'd wanted them to have it. I believed them, at the time. The first strange thing happened about a year later. Family group messages slowly stopped including me. Lake weekends, holiday planning, birthday dinners. My aunt began using one particular phrase over and over. Immediate family only. Interesting wording, because she'd never used it before. Then came, we're trying to keep things within the family. Again, odd wording. I noticed patterns for a living. Patterns always meant something. Around that same time, my mother suddenly became unusually warm. Calls every week, questions about work, invitations to lunch, compliments. Too many compliments. People often mistake manipulation for affection. Professionally, I never made that mistake. Personally, I wanted to. More than I'd ever admit. 3 months before my 26th birthday, she called. Claire, we've realized we never properly celebrated your accomplishments. We'd like to take you somewhere special. I nearly laughed. 26 years, and suddenly, luxury restaurants? Fine wine? Celebration? No. People don't change overnight. Not people like my mother. They change when circumstances change. The question wasn't whether something had happened. The question was, what? That same week, while reviewing archived county property records for an unrelated probate case, I accidentally found something connected to my grandmother's estate. One document, one reference number, one trust I'd never heard mentioned before. It didn't answer my questions. It created better ones. Curiosity has a strange momentum. Once it begins, it refuses to stop. I filed a formal records request, then another, then hired an attorney completely unrelated to my employer, just to verify what I was beginning to suspect. By the time my mother invited me to birthday dinner, I already knew far more than she imagined. I simply hadn't told anyone. Not yet. As I parked outside the Hawthorne house that evening, I sat in my car for several minutes, watching people walk inside, couples laughing, families celebrating anniversaries, children dressed too formally, normal dinners. Mine wouldn't be one of them. I reached into the passenger seat, picked up a simple manila folder. No label, no markings. Inside, 3 documents, each capable of changing the entire evening. I slipped the folder beneath my arm, locked the car, walked toward the entrance. For everyone else, tonight was supposed to end with my family cutting me out of their lives. For me, it was something entirely different. It was the last performance before the curtain finally came down, and the people waiting in the audience had no idea they were about to become part of the story. Dinner moved exactly the way difficult conversations always do. Too slowly at first, then all at once. The breadbasket arrived. No one touched it. Wine was poured. My mother complimented the restaurant twice. My father checked his watch 3 times. Neither asked what I wanted for my birthday. Neither asked whether I was happy. Neither asked if I loved my new job. They only circled one subject: money. So, Dad cleared his throat. You're probably making 6 figures now. Comfortably. You've been investing? A little. Retirement? Every month. He nodded thoughtfully. Smart. My mother smiled across the candlelight. We always taught you responsibility. I almost laughed. No. Life had taught me responsibility. Being unwanted had simply made me learn it earlier than most people. The entrees arrived. My mother ordered sea bass. Dad ordered filet mignon. I chose roasted chicken. Not because it was cheaper, because after years of client dinners, I had learned never to order food that distracted me from the conversation. Something important was coming. I wanted a clear head. My mother folded her napkin neatly beside her plate. There it was. The signal. I'd seen grieving spouses make that exact movement before saying, "There's something you should know." She looked at my father. He nodded. Just barely. Permission granted. Claire. Her voice softened. We've been carrying something for a very long time. I met her eyes. I know. She blinked. You know? I know you've planned tonight carefully. Her smile faltered. Not that. She leaned forward. What I'm about to tell you will probably change how you see us forever. I didn't answer. Inside, my heartbeat slowed. Not sped up. There comes a point when you've anticipated bad news for so long that the waiting becomes worse than the truth itself. We adopted you. She said it plainly. No hesitation. No apology. You were 6 weeks old. Silence settled over the table. The waiter walked past. Someone at another table laughed. A wine glass clinked softly. Life continued around us. Only our table had stopped moving. Dad watched me carefully. Waiting. Mom watched even more carefully. Searching my face. Looking for devastation. For tears. For confusion. For the collapse she'd clearly rehearsed. Instead, I reached for my water. Took one sip. Set the glass back down. Neither of them understood why my hands weren't shaking. You don't seem surprised, Dad finally said. I'm listening. Mom frowned. That's all you have to say? For now. She exchanged another glance with my father. This wasn't how she'd imagined the scene. I could almost see her mentally skipping ahead in the script. She continued. The adoption wasn't exactly... She searched for the word. Traditional. What does that mean? Dad answered this time. There were financial incentives. I remained silent. He mistook silence for permission. When we adopted you, there were state assistance payments. He kept talking. Tax advantages. Certain family trust conditions. It made sense. Made sense. Interesting phrase. Not, we wanted you. Not, we loved you. Not even. It was complicated. Simply, it made sense. Mom picked up where he'd stopped. My mother-in-law, she meant Nana. They had certain expectations. She believed every child deserved a stable home. So, we adopted. She smiled. A strange smile, satisfied, almost proud of her efficiency. It worked well for everyone, except the child, I thought. Then came the sentence she'd clearly been waiting all evening to deliver. The benefits ended years ago. She spoke slowly. But there were still the other advantages. She folded her hands. Those end tonight. I looked at her calmly. What changes tonight? She smiled. You turn 26. You're no longer useful to the arrangement. There it was. Not shouted, not whispered. Simply delivered, like reading weather. Dad reached for the leather portfolio. Opened it carefully, removed several documents, placed them in front of me. We've updated our estate plan. You won't inherit from us. You won't receive the house. You won't remain a beneficiary. He slid the papers across the white tablecloth. We thought it would be kinder to handle this face-to-face. Kinder. Professionally, I'd reviewed hundreds of estate amendments. Emotionally, I'd never imagined becoming one. I lowered my eyes toward the documents. Didn't touch them. The title page alone told me almost everything. Amendment to last will and testament. Interesting. Very interesting. Because it wasn't the document I'd expected, nor was it the document that actually mattered. I flipped only the first page. Enough to confirm it. Exactly as I'd suspected. They'd hired an attorney, spent money, filed amendments, removed me everywhere they legally controlled. Except the one place they didn't. They hadn't touched it. Because they couldn't. And judging by the confidence on my mother's face, she still didn't know the difference. Please sign the acknowledgement. Dad pushed a pen toward me. It only confirms we've informed you. I almost smiled. Only that word had cost countless grieving families thousands of dollars. Nothing is ever only in estate law. I read the final paragraph, exactly as expected. By signing, I'd acknowledge receiving notice, waive future disputes regarding their estate, accept the amendments voluntarily. Beautiful drafting, competent attorney, completely irrelevant. I gently slid the pen back toward my father. I'll pass. Mom's expression hardened. Claire, don't make this difficult. I'm not. You are. You've barely reacted. I looked at her. What reaction were you expecting? Her mouth opened slightly, closed again. She hadn't prepared for questions, only emotions. Dad leaned forward. Surely, you understand why this has to happen. I understand your decision. You aren't angry? I didn't say that. You aren't crying. No. Mom looked genuinely frustrated now, almost disappointed. She'd planned an emotional ending. Instead, she'd found herself sitting across from a woman calmly, reviewing legal paperwork. Then she made her mistake. Perhaps because silence frightened her. Perhaps because she wanted one final victory. She repeated the sentence. Slower this time. We only adopted you because it benefited us. She smiled again. That isn't cruel. It's honest. No. It was both. But hearing it twice had a strange effect. The first time, it hurt. The second time, it became evidence. Not about me, about her. I looked past my mother's shoulder for the briefest second, toward the back of the restaurant. Table 11, exactly where I'd requested. 3 people sat quietly beneath a hanging chandelier. A silver-haired woman, a younger man, and a woman, who looked enough like me that even from across the room, the resemblance was impossible to ignore. They hadn't interrupted. They hadn't stared. They'd simply remained where I'd asked them to remain, waiting, supporting, ready. My mother noticed my eyes move. She glanced behind herself automatically. Only halfway, not far enough, then looked back at me. What are you looking at? I smiled. Nothing. Not yet. I folded my hands calmly over my own manila folder, still unopened, still resting beside my plate. My father stared at it. For the first time all evening, his confidence disappeared. He'd noticed it when I arrived, ignored it through dinner, but now he couldn't stop looking at it. Because lawyers, accountants, and careful people all recognize the same thing. Someone who brings documents to an emotional conversation rarely arrives unprepared, and somewhere deep inside, my father had finally begun wondering whether tonight's surprise might not belong only to them. For several long seconds, no one spoke. My father kept staring at the manila folder beside my plate. My mother kept staring at me. She'd spent weeks preparing tonight. Every sentence had been rehearsed. Every document carefully printed. Every pause strategically placed. But one thing hadn't gone according to plan. I wasn't falling apart, and that frightened her. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. Claire, what's in the folder? I rested my hand on top of it. Nothing concerning you. My mother laughed softly. Everything here concerns us. No, I answered calmly. It really doesn't. Her smile disappeared. You've been very composed. I've had time. What does that mean? It means... I looked directly at her. You aren't the first person to tell me I'm adopted. The words landed like a dropped wine glass. My father's head snapped upward. What? My mother blinked. What did you just say? I said, I already knew. Silence. Real silence this time. No clinking glasses. No movement. Even the waiter approaching with dessert slowed when he sensed something unusual at our table. Mom's voice came out barely above a whisper. Who told you? No one. I found out. When? 6 months ago. Dad's face drained of color. 6 months. That number mattered. I watched him doing the calculation. 6 months meant I hadn't just discovered it. I'd had time. Time to investigate. Time to prepare. Time to act. How? My mother asked. I requested my original records. She leaned back. You had no right. I had every legal right. She stopped talking. Because she knew I was correct. I wanted answers. I found them. I met someone. Her eyebrows knitted together. Who? My birth mother. The words hung between us. Dad closed his eyes briefly. Mom stared as though I'd spoken another language. You met her? Yes. When? About 5 months ago. You've been seeing her? Yes. And you didn't tell us? I couldn't help it. A tiny smile appeared. You didn't tell me I was adopted. For the first time all evening, my mother had no response. Dad looked toward the folder again. What else do you know? A great deal. His breathing changed, just slightly. Professionally, I'd learned to notice stress before people admitted they felt it. His right thumb had begun rubbing against his wedding ring, a nervous habit. I'd seen it at Nana's funeral. I'd seen it when he signed refinancing papers years earlier. He was scared. Not because I'd found my birth mother. Because he suspected I'd found something else. Mom tried another direction. Claire, we wanted to tell you. When? She hesitated. We were waiting for the right time. The right time? Yes. When the trust ended? Her face froze. Dad slowly turned toward me. What trust? I looked at him quietly. The one Nana created. Neither parent spoke. That told me everything. I don't know what you're talking about. My mother answered too quickly. You do. I don't. You really should stop lying. Her jaw tightened. I've had enough of this. So have I. I opened my folder. Slowly, not dramatically, just enough to remove 3 sheets of paper. I placed them neatly on the white tablecloth. Not facing me, facing them. First, a letter from an estate attorney confirming legal representation. Second, a certified copy of a trust distribution schedule. Third, a certified copy of my original birth record. I folded my hands and waited. Dad reached first. Not my mother. Always the careful one. His eyes landed on the attorney's letter. He swallowed, then moved to the second document. Halfway through reading, his breathing stopped. Literally. For one terrifying second, he simply stared. Then he whispered, "Oh no." My mother snatched the paper from him. What? She scanned the page. The confidence disappeared from her face line by line. Her lips moved silently as she read, "Caregiver distributions. Terminate. Upon Claire Donovan reaching 26 years of age. And remaining trust assets. On transfer directly." She stopped, started reading again, slower, hoping the words might somehow rearrange themselves. They didn't. She looked at Dad. "You told me," I thought. "You said—" He couldn't answer, because there wasn't an answer, only a mistake. A very expensive one. I spoke gently. Nana didn't leave everything through her will. Dad stared at the table. "I know. You knew?" "I found out." "When?" "Months ago." Mom looked from him to me, then back again. "You knew?" He nodded once. "I suspected." "You never told me?" I wasn't sure. "No," she whispered. "No. I had seen this before. Many times. Not this exact situation, but this exact expression. It happens when people discover they misunderstood. The document that controlled their future. They focused on the wrong paperwork, ignored the right paperwork. Then reality arrived all at once. My mother looked at me desperately. This can't be right." "It is. We changed the will." "I know." She blinked. "You knew?" "I read it." "Then why didn't you say anything?" "Because it wasn't relevant." She frowned. "What do you mean it wasn't relevant?" "Your will governs what belongs to you." I tapped the trust schedule gently. "This never belonged to you." Dad covered his face with one hand. He already understood. He'd understood the moment he saw the trust. My mother was still catching up. "I don't understand." "I'll explain. Nana created an irrevocable trust. The home. The monthly caregiver distributions. The remaining assets. All of it. They weren't yours. You managed them. You benefited from them. But you never owned them." She stared blankly. "So, when I turned 26, the distributions ended automatically, and the remainder transferred according to Nana's instructions, without court, without your approval, without your will. No," she whispered again. "No." She reached for the document. Reading, 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 searching desperately for some forgotten paragraph, some loophole, some sentence she'd missed. There wasn't one. Dad finally spoke. "So, you've known for 6 months?" "Yes." "And you let us—" He couldn't finish. "I let you finish. Professionally, you never interrupt someone making their own mistake. You let them complete it." Mom looked almost angry now. "You should have warned us." I tilted my head slightly. "Why?" We're your parents. I held her gaze. Were those your words 20 minutes ago? She said nothing. She looked again at the trust, then at me. Then suddenly, something changed. Not grief, not shame, calculation. Fast, cold, instant. I'd seen that expression my entire childhood. She wasn't thinking about losing me anymore. She was thinking about losing the money. And in that moment, I understood something I'd never fully admitted to myself before. The dinner had never really been about disowning me. That had only been step 1. Step 2 had been getting me to sign the waiver before I discovered what Nana had actually done. And now, that opportunity was gone forever. For several seconds, no one moved. The restaurant continued around us as though nothing extraordinary had happened. A waiter uncorked a bottle of wine at a nearby table. Someone laughed softly across the room. Silverware touched porcelain. Only our table had fallen completely silent. My mother was the first to recover. Remarkably, she didn't apologize. She didn't ask how I'd discovered the trust. She didn't ask whether I'd been hurt. Her first question was exactly the one I should have expected. How much? I looked at her. I'm sorry? The trust. How much is left? There it was. 26 years, reduced to one financial question. Not, are you all right? Not, can we explain? Only, how much? Dad closed his eyes. Elaine? She ignored him. Claire. We're family. I almost smiled. 20 minutes ago, I wasn't. You don't understand. She leaned forward. Your grandmother expected us to manage everything. No, I answered quietly. She expected you to care for me. There's a difference. She reached for the trust papers again. There has to be some mistake. There isn't. We lived in that house for years. I know. We maintained it. I know. We paid taxes. The trust reimbursed those. She stared. You know that too? Yes. Every answer made her smaller. Because every answer confirmed the same thing. I'd done my homework. Dad finally looked directly at me. When did you hire an attorney? About 5 months ago. You thought I wanted independent advice. You expected this. I expected something. He nodded slowly. I suppose you did. There wasn't anger in his voice anymore, only resignation. My mother wasn't ready to surrender. What exactly are you planning to do? With what? The house. The trust. The money. I haven't decided. You can't just... She stopped herself. I noticed it immediately. Can't just what? Spend it? Keep it? Not share it? Interesting. I folded the documents neatly back into my folder. There isn't really anything left to discuss. There absolutely is. Mom's voice sharpened. You've misunderstood the entire situation. I don't believe I have. We sacrificed everything for you. I met her eyes. Did you? You have no idea how difficult adoption was. I'm sure it wasn't easy. We changed our lives. I'm sure you did. We gave you opportunities. I earned my opportunities. Her face hardened. You are unbelievably ungrateful. The sentence surprised me. Not because she said it. Because she believed it. I worked nights through college. You chose that. I paid every tuition bill. You benefited from living with us. I moved out at 18. We still raised you. You also received monthly trust distributions for doing so. Silence. Again. She stood suddenly. The chair scraped loudly across the hardwood floor. Several nearby diners looked over. Do you hear yourself? Yes. You sound like a lawyer. I work in estate administration. I sound like someone who reads documents. Dad stood too, not aggressively, almost automatically, trying to calm the situation before it became public. Elaine, sit down. She shook her head. No. Then she looked at me. You're choosing strangers over your family. I looked at her for several seconds, then answered honestly. I don't think that's what I'm doing. She laughed bitterly. Really? You track down people you've never even known. They're my biological family. They're strangers. Were, I corrected gently. Not anymore. Something changed in her expression. Suspicion. Confusion. Then, a tiny flash of fear. You've met them. Yes. When? Months ago. They know? They know everything. Her breathing caught. Everything. That word landed heavily. Dad looked toward the back of the restaurant. Not intentionally, instinctively, just a quick glance. Then another. Longer this time. He frowned, following my eyes from earlier, toward the rear dining room, toward table 11. 3 people sat there quietly. A silver-haired woman, a young man, and the woman with my eyes. Dad looked back at me, then back again. The resemblance hit him all at once. His face went completely pale. Claire. His voice had become almost a whisper. They're here. It wasn't a question. I nodded once. Yes. My mother turned toward him. What? He didn't answer. His eyes never left the back of the restaurant. Slowly, almost unwillingly, my mother followed his gaze. She turned in her chair. Halfway, then farther, until she saw them. The woman at table 11 looked up at exactly that moment. Our eyes met first. Then hers shifted gently toward my mother. No anger, no accusation, just quiet recognition. My birth mother gave me the smallest smile, the kind people wear when they want you to know, you're not alone. My mother's face emptied. Color drained from it. She looked at the woman, then at me, then back again. You... She couldn't finish. Yes. You brought them? I invited them. To this dinner? Yes. Her voice cracked. They've been here the whole time? The whole time. She slowly lowered herself back into her chair. Around us. The restaurant had begun noticing. Not because anyone was shouting, because something unmistakably important was happening. People sense truth, even when they don't know the details. My mother whispered. Why? I answered softly. Because I promised myself I would never hear those words alone. She closed her eyes. For the first time that evening, she looked genuinely shaken. Not because she'd hurt me, because she'd been witnessed. At table 11, the older woman, the one I'd come to know as Grandma Eleanor, stood first. She was 82, small, elegant, determined. Then my younger half-brother stood. Finally, my birth mother. They didn't approach. They didn't interrupt. They simply stood, waiting, exactly as we'd agreed, waiting for me, not to rescue me, to welcome me. I picked up my folder, placed it beneath my arm, then looked at my parents one final time. You asked earlier why I wasn't crying. Neither answered. I'll tell you. I paused, because 6 months ago, I stopped being afraid of losing people who had already decided I wasn't theirs. I stepped away from the table. My mother reached out instinctively. Claire. I didn't stop walking. Behind me, I heard my father say quietly, let her go. Then after a long silence, he added 4 words that came far too late. My mother was right. I kept walking. 15 feet, 3 tables, 26 years. Every step felt lighter than the one before, and waiting beside the 4th chair at table 11 was the family that had already saved me a place. I crossed the dining room slowly, not because I was uncertain, because for the first time in my life, no one was asking me to hurry into becoming someone they needed. Every step felt different, lighter. Behind me, I heard nothing. No shouting, no pleading, just silence. The kind that follows when a carefully rehearsed performance ends before the final act. When I reached table 11, my birth mother, Laura Bennett, opened her arms. She didn't rush toward me. She simply stood there, waiting for me to decide. That mattered. Everything about the last 6 months had mattered. No pressure, no expectations, no guilt, only room. I stepped into her embrace. She held me gently, as though she understood exactly how careful broken things must be handled. I've got you, she whispered. You don't have to be brave anymore. Those words broke something inside me. Not painfully, peacefully. For 26 years, I'd believed love was something you earned, something measured by obedience, by usefulness, by making yourself smaller so other people stayed comfortable. Laura asked none of those things. She simply held me. Grandma Eleanor smiled through tears. I've been waiting to hug you since the day your mother called. My younger brother, Ethan, looked almost embarrassed by how emotional he was becoming. Then he laughed. I wasn't planning on crying in a steakhouse. Neither was I. Yet there we were, 4 people who had shared less than 6 months together, feeling more like family than I'd experienced in 26 years. A server quietly approached. I believe this belongs here. He placed a slice of chocolate cake in front of me. 1 candle, just 1. I stared at it. Laura noticed immediately. If that's too painful? I shook my head. No, it isn't. Because this candle wasn't lonely. This candle wasn't an apology disguised as a celebration. It wasn't all someone believed I deserved. It was simply a birthday candle, surrounded by people who were happy I existed. That made all the difference. Across the dining room, I could still see my parents. My mother hadn't moved. She sat staring at the trust schedule I'd left behind, reading the same paragraph again and again, as though enough rereading might change the outcome. My father remained seated beside her. His shoulders looked smaller than I had ever seen them. For a brief moment, our eyes met. He gave one slow nod, not asking forgiveness, not asking me to return, simply acknowledging that his mother had seen the future more clearly than he ever had. Then he lowered his eyes again, and that was the last conversation we ever had without words. The following weeks were surprisingly quiet. There were no dramatic lawsuits, no television-worthy confrontations, because legally, there wasn't much anyone could do. Nana's trust had been established correctly years before her death. An independent corporate trustee administered every provision exactly as written. The monthly caregiver, distributions ended automatically on my 26th birthday. The remaining trust assets transferred exactly as Nana had instructed. No vote, no permission, no signatures, just the fulfillment of one woman's final promise. My parents hired another attorney, then another. Neither found a legal path around Nana's wishes. Eventually, they stopped trying. Within 10 months, they sold the historic house. Without the trust distributions, maintaining it had become impossible. They moved into a much smaller home across town. I heard about it from distant relatives, not because anyone wanted sympathy, because families always talk, especially when money disappears. My Aunt Linda, who had spent years reminding everyone about real family, called exactly once. She left a voicemail. After everything we've done for you. I deleted it before she finished. That was the last time I heard her voice. Sometimes, silence is the healthiest boundary you'll ever create. 3 months later, my father sent a text. Just 4 words. I should have protected you. Nothing else. No excuses. No requests. No explanation. I read it once, then locked my phone. I never answered. Not because I hated him. Because some apologies arrive after they've stopped asking anything of the person they hurt. By then, the work belongs to the one apologizing. Not the one wounded. Sunday afternoons changed. 4 o'clock was still reserved. Just as it had always been. Only now, instead of calling Nana, I drove 20 minutes to Laura's house. Grandma Eleanor made grilled cheese sandwiches using the recipe Nana had once taught me. The first time I tasted one, I laughed so hard I cried. Different women, different kitchens, the same comfort. Sometimes, life finds strange ways to complete circles. Ethan never stopped sending terrible jokes. Every Tuesday morning, without fail, usually before 8. Most of them weren't funny. That wasn't the point. The point was, someone thought about me often enough to press send. Growing up, I never realized how extraordinary that simple act could feel. A year after the dinner, Laura handed me a photo album. The first page contained a picture of her at 19, holding me in the hospital. The second page was empty. She smiled. I left space for everything we still get to do. That sentence stayed with me, because that's what real family had always been. Not people protecting the past. People making room for the future. Sometimes people ask whether I regret discovering the truth, whether I wish I'd never known I was adopted. The answer surprises them. No, not for a single day, because learning I was adopted wasn't what changed my life. Learning that being chosen should never come with a price tag did. Nana understood something long before anyone else. Love isn't proven by keeping someone. It's proven by making sure they're safe, even after you're gone. She couldn't stop my parents from seeing me as a transaction, but she could make sure I would never remain trapped inside one, and she did. Every birthday since, the 4 of us returned to the Hawthorne house. We reserved table 11, always, not because we enjoy remembering painful evenings, because that's where my real life began. The staff even remembers us now. Every year, 1 chocolate cake, 1 candle, 4 forks, no speeches, no performances, no conditions, just laughter echoing across the table. If this story taught me anything, it's this. The people who truly love you will never ask you to earn your place beside them. They won't keep score. They won't calculate your value, and they certainly won't measure your worth by what you can give them. The right people simply pull out a chair, smile when you arrive, and make room. For 26 years, I believed I had to deserve a seat at someone else's table. It turned out, the table waiting for me had been there all along. I just had to stop sitting where I was merely tolerated, long enough to find where I was genuinely welcome.